Hello everyone, and welcome to Anomalous Archive, where we post scary stories to help you sleep. Please comment where you are listening to my videos from, since I believe it would be fun for all of us to know. Also, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's reach 50 subscribers until the end of this month. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Every day, we do foolish things. Some we remember even decades later, while hundreds of others we forget immediately. Try describing your routine week in detail, and you'll undoubtedly uncover a couple of idiotic acts. If, of course, you can recall them. If it weren't for my foolishness, this entire story would have turned out to be a simple, sad note about human grief and loss. As it happened, among my close living relatives, I only had my maternal grandmother and a father who hadn't been heard from in years. In 2015, my mother and I moved from grandma's home to another region. However, we didn't lose touch, and I greatly valued our communication. I visited her several times a year, frequently called her, and even wrote letters. She loved them very much. After my mother's death, I lived with my grandmother for an entire month, gave her a smartphone, and taught her how to send photos and use search engines. She enjoyed the latter more. She searched for recipes, TV shows, and funny greetings. However, she didn't like texting and preferred calling. Naturally, I didn't have to sift through tons of colorful greeting cards and messenger apps, which was a relief. But on the other hand, had she sent me just a couple of lines of text on that ill-fated evening, I wouldn't have encountered the horror I'm about to recount. In the middle of the summer, my fiancée and I went to the countryside and lived for 2 whole days without the internet or communication. We returned on Monday morning, and that very evening, I received a call. On the other end of the line was the senior resident of my grandmother's apartment building. "Daniel Brown, hello. Please don't worry. Can you hear me well?" At these words, my hands immediately started trembling. Grandma had long had heart problems. She took many pills, kept a blood pressure journal, and followed all the recommendations. I believed that with such diligence, everything would be fine, but I knew that sooner or later, age and illness would take their toll. However, one can never truly be ready for this. If it weren't for my fiancé's timely support, I might have collapsed on the spot. Things turned out far worse than I had initially imagined. On a hot day, neighbors noticed a strange smell in the stairwell. They didn't delay. They called the building manager and tried to reach me, but to no avail. A local police officer came and ordered them to call emergency services. The door was forced open. Grandma was found in the kitchen. She lay on her back with open eyes and a slack jaw. The sunlight fell on her pale skin, a horrifying sight. I said I'd be there soon and rushed to pack for a couple of days. As I gathered my things, I regained some composure and instructed my fiancée to buy wreaths and a cross. We decided to bury her next to my mother at the city cemetery. Grandma wasn't particularly religious and had mentioned a few times during conversations, maybe cremation. At that moment, another call came in. A funeral service agent, Thomas, expressed his condolences and spoke calmly and matter-of-factly, almost hypnotically. He explained that the apartment currently reeked of a foul odor that wouldn't dissipate on its own, but his company could help. They would clean and perform what he called deodorization, removing the smell with chemicals and purifying the room with a special smoke. I agreed without hesitation. Then he asked when I would arrive. I replied that I would be there by 7 to 8 a.m. Thomas assured me that everything would be ready by then, and they wouldn't even seal the door. On the way, I wondered if I had acted rashly by letting cleaners and other odor removers into an empty apartment. Would they steal anything of value? But I'll say this in advance. Everything stayed in place, and nothing was stolen. For the 2-room apartment, I paid $400. By morning, there was indeed no smell. Around 8 o'clock, I met Thomas at the entrance. We drove to the morgue in his car. On the way, I told him how I wanted to proceed with the body, and Thomas, after listening, gave me the pricing. I agreed to everything. It was very hard at the morgue, and even describing my feelings is painful. I'll just say that we were there for about 40 minutes. I learned very little. In short, she had died of cardiac arrest around 2 to 3 a.m. In medical terms, it sounded a bit more complex. By 9:30, Thomas brought me back to my grandmother's building. As for the apartment, it's up to you. If you decide to sell, give us a call. We have good realtors. That phrase hit me so hard. I knew that the funeral business was serious. It's no wonder their hearses sometimes arrive at a deceased person's home before the ambulance or police. I wasn't surprised by their in-house cleaners or their ability to rid a flat of odors. But the inclusion of realtors working on commission was impressive. Then again, perhaps behind big money, there is always someone's simple human grief. I said goodbye and went to ring the intercom of the head of the building. Upstairs, she almost burst into tears when she saw me. "Daniel, hold on." She handed me an envelope and a bunch of keys. I locked up at night after they left. Just be careful when turning it, or it might not move. The one who broke the door said it's better to install a new one. We collected a little something with the neighbors in the envelope too. I thanked her and went down to the second floor with a heavy heart. I entered the apartment, locked the door, turned to the kitchen, and broke into sobs. Despair mixed with terrible exhaustion. I wiped my tears, washed my face in the bathroom, changed into home clothes, and lay on the couch in the living room. There was no fear. I didn't feel anything at all, except for a deep melancholy. I slept until 5 in the evening, barely peeling myself off the pillow. My lips were dry, and my head was splitting. I saw a missed call from Thomas. I called back and found out that tomorrow morning I could attend the funeral service and say goodbye to my grandmother. The sun was still shining brightly outside the window. It was hot in the apartment. I don't know if I truly smelled the stench of a corpse or if I imagined it, but soon I ran to open all the windows. Lastly, I went to the kitchen and suddenly noticed the strange details I had missed when I first came here, exhausted. First, there was an open prayer book on the table. I read the headings on the spread. It contained Troparian and Contagion to a Martyr. There were also bookmarks, one on the page with a prayer for the salvation of the soul, and another on From Sudden Death. This struck me. I had already mentioned that my grandmother could not be called religious, and here was a prayer book. Did she sense she was leaving and decide to cleanse her soul? Second, her phone. It lay nearby in its book-style case, charged to 60%. I checked the call log and, unsurprisingly, found several outgoing calls to her beloved Daniel, all missed. Tears welled up in my eyes again. The last time she called was at 2 in the morning on Saturday when I was at the dacha, out of network coverage. And suddenly, something pushed me to open the search engine. Whether it was intuition or sheer coincidence, I scrolled through the search history and froze. At 1 a.m., what to do if you see evil spirits. At 1:30 a.m., saw the devil. What should I do? At 1:55 a.m., the last one. What should I do? A wave of terror washed over me. I glanced at the doors, at the hallway beyond them, swallowed hard, and tried to steady my breathing. Despite the sunlight streaming through the window, I felt in danger, as if it were late at night, and I knew for certain someone else was in the apartment. I shook my head, pushed away the creepy thoughts, checked the open tabs again, but found nothing useful. Once more, I went back to the call log. Only me, no police, no ambulance. Just the grandson. Scattered near the prayer book were blister packs of pills for hypertension, arrhythmia, and sedatives. Obviously, she had taken them when she was distressed. But what had she seen? If it had been a burglar or another criminal, she would have called the police immediately. And why that hour? Why wasn't she asleep so late? I looked around the kitchen. Everything was tidy, except for the table. I leaned against the windowsill and glanced out the window. Nothing unusual. Parked cars, a playground in the distance, a row of tires planted as a barrier along the sidewalk, familiar panel buildings from childhood, a concrete lamppost. But then my gaze caught on something. There was a pot with aloe on the windowsill, and behind it, a dark smudge. I moved the plant and froze. A red smear, blood, was visible in the corner of the glass. Wrapping my finger in a damp wipe, I decided to wipe away the nastiness, but it didn't come off. Then came the unsettling realization. The stain was not inside. I'd heard that birds could crash fatally into windows, but I couldn't believe this was the cause. The picture was truly puzzling. An elderly woman with heart problems doesn't sleep at 1 a.m., though she usually goes to bed before midnight, sees something or someone, mistakes it for the devil, searches for answers online, and simultaneously calls me. At around 2 or 3 a.m., according to the coroner, death occurs. There were two possibilities. Either her health issues had driven her to hallucinate in her final agony, or someone had frightened her to death. After waiting half an hour, I pulled myself together and called my fiancée to share the news. At the same time, I made sure she had completed all her errands. My words about the prayer book and my grandmother's search queries genuinely scared her. She kept asking questions about what had happened, and when she heard about the bloodstain, she suddenly began sobbing and begged me to spend the night in a hotel. I lied, promising to book a room for 2 nights, but I still stayed in my family's apartment. The expenses for gas and the funeral were already weighing heavily. I couldn't afford to spend even more on a hotel. I won't hide it, I was scared too. Anyone in my place would have gotten goosebumps from the devil-related queries alone. But I forbade myself to panic, muttering under my breath, "You've gone soft, believing in ghosts or monsters. Pull yourself together. You're a grown man. You're burying a loved one. At least don't disgrace her memory." And for a while, it got easier. At sunset, I decided to head to the store. I grabbed all kinds of junk food for the microwave, just to avoid the hassle of cooking. Standing at the checkout, I overheard a strange conversation. A customer was saying, "No, Sarah, I won't quit smoking like this." The cashier replied, "At least cheer me up for once." "Any leads there?" "How should I know?" he laughed. "My job is to haul corpses." "All right, I'm off." As he walked away with his bag, he muttered, "Don't come if I call." When my turn came, I cautiously asked what they had been talking about. The cashier gave me such a surprised look that I felt awkward. "Where do you live? Don't you watch the news or what?" On my way back, I opened a local news site, sat by the entrance and started reading. The reports were about suicides. The first body had been found a week and a half ago, very close to my grandmother's house, a man's headless corpse. No suspects. The second body appeared a week ago, also headless. Some deputy claimed there was nothing to fear, saying this wasn't the work of a serial killer. 3 days ago, another corpse. Nightfall came unusually quickly, and the wind picked up. A streetlight outside the house turned on. I shivered and checked my watch. 9:30 p.m. For a moment, I even forgot about my personal tragedy. I ran up the stairs to the building manager, rang her doorbell. I must have scared her with my questions, but I didn't learn anything useful in the end. She said everyone had heard about the murders, but no one had seen the killer. The only time she personally heard a man scream at night. She rushed to the window, but saw nothing except an indistinct shadow that quickly disappeared into the darkness around the corner. I returned to the apartment, feeling down again. I had a snack and sat in the living room with my phone. The silence weighed on me. At my mother's funeral, my grandmother had insisted that one should neither watch TV nor have any fun after a funeral. I wasn't sleepy. Suddenly, I remembered that mirrors in the home of the deceased should be covered. I took a sheet from the closet and began hanging it. A baseless anxiety grew in my chest. I couldn't find peace. and nothing could dispel this strange feeling. I went to the kitchen, put on the kettle, and suddenly felt someone's gaze on me. My cheeks broke out in goosebumps, and fear flooded my body. I trembled, slowly turned to the door, peered into the opening, and listened. "Grandma?" I whispered, realizing my voice was shaking too. Silence was my only answer. I swallowed, tried to pull myself together, took a deep breath, and approached the table. I felt a slight dizziness, moved to the windowsill, caught the glow of the streetlight, and met the gaze of a grinning face. It was something unimaginable, a dim orange blotch under the lamp with a darker greenish outline of a skull above it. Ears and a noseless face were clearly visible. Huge eyes with bloodshot whites and pupils stared straight at me. I froze, stunned for about 10 seconds, then moved sideways, and the monster's gaze followed me. Just below the horrifying eyes was a toothy grin that stretched wide. That definitely burned into me. Like a madman, I bolted into the hallway, then the living room, slammed the interior door, and pressed my back against it. My shaky legs barely held me up as my heart pounded painfully and rapidly in my chest. That was what my grandmother saw before she died. That was what had frightened her in her final moments. It had always been nearby. I had looked at it during the day, sat in its light on the bench outside the building in the evening, and never suspected the danger. Terror seized my breath, my knees gave out, and I painfully hit the floor, knocking my head hard. The yellow lights of the chandelier stretched into streaky blurs, and then the room plunged into total darkness. I wasn't alone in the darkness. I couldn't stand or escape. I wanted to scream in fear, but my mouth felt sewn shut. The scream crashed against my closed lips and painfully crawled back into my throat. It was searching for me, wandering through the apartment, silently smiling, and inspecting every dark corner with predatory little eyes. It knew I had nowhere to go. Sticky, bloody drool dripped from its greenish chin, and I knew without a doubt that soon I would be ground into a disgusting paste. I thought about how lucky my grandmother was. She had passed away before the creature entered the apartment. I, on the other hand, faced a torturous ordeal and prayed for death. I felt warm tears on my face and an inexplicable burning in my chest, and suddenly I realized I couldn't take a breath. My prayers were answered when a heavy, bony claw pressed down on my soul. Just before the creature arrived, an electric jolt seemed to run through my body, restoring strength to my arms and legs. I leapt up, opened my glued-shut eyelids, and found myself on the couch. It was deep night. The leaves outside rustled softly, and rain was drizzling. A draft at my back, chilling me with icy currents. I was drenched in sweat, and the pounding of my heart radiated into my temples and forehead. For the first time in my life, my teeth chattered from fear. Could it have all been a dream? But when had I managed to fall asleep? Getting up, I quickly walked to the bathroom and washed my face. A sheet still hung over the mirror, which meant it hadn't been a dream. Slowly, I moved toward the kitchen, peeked around the corner. No face. I cursed aloud, caught my breath, reached for the kettle, and froze in horror. It was warm. Could it really have been real? Quickly returning to the living room, I climbed under a blanket and desperately tried to piece together what had actually happened. My thoughts were jumbled. Hideous faces peeked out from the dark gaps between memories. I felt uneasy, sitting there lost, quietly listening to music from an old tradition of my grandmother's. Anything to drown out the screaming voice in my head, even for a moment. Meanwhile, the rain outside intensified. Drops hammered against the windowsills, and lightning flashed. Suddenly, a scream rang out, very close, somewhere in the yard. I pinched myself to check if I was dreaming, cautiously approached the curtain, peeked out, but saw nothing. There were no more screams. About 10 minutes later, blue and red lights flickered on the curtains. Someone in the building must have called the police. I heard voices, shouting, the sound of a car engine. At dawn, when I looked out again, I saw a van with the words "Special Transport." Two people were loading a large black bag. Nearby, a stern-looking man in plain clothes smoked a cigarette, while a skinny young woman in uniform shifted nervously from foot to foot. The news about the new corpse surfaced only by morning. At 9 o'clock, I called my fiancée, but immediately hung up. I chickened out of sheer stupidity. She had asked me to stay the night at a hotel, but I didn't listen. By 10, I drove to the crematorium, paid for all the services, and once again asked if there was any way to speed up the process with the ashes. I slipped Thomas another $3,000 on top. He stepped away for a few minutes and then returned with good news. Everything would be ready by the next morning. I got into the car. I had everything with me: documents, money, a full tank of gas. All that remained was to pick up my bag of belongings while the sun was still shining and find a place to stay for the night. But here I made a foolish decision. Never before in my life have I recalled that decision without shuddering and cursing myself with the harshest words. But the past cannot be undone. That day, I started the engine and drove back to Grandma's house. I wanted to catch up on sleep before it got dark and then clear out of the apartment. The day was foggy and cool. In the courtyard, the smell of burning lingered, dogs barked, and the squeak of children's swings grated unpleasantly. All of it hammered at my mind. A sharp pain pierced my head again. Even the pills didn't help. I sat in the kitchen for a long time with a cup of tea, pondering, searching for answers in my subconscious, when suddenly it hit me. Even if it had all been a dream, Grandma had also seen some kind of devil. How was that possible? Only one question remained. From which window had she seen it? If it was the kitchen window, like I had, then why did the prayer and the medicine decompose? She ran off either to the living room or the bedroom afterward. In that case, perhaps she too thought it was just a dream. The questions kept piling up, and the terror crept insidiously toward my frayed nerves. For the third time, I went to see the building supervisor. She looked surprised. "Why do you look so disheveled, Daniel? Didn't sleep?" I ignored her questions. "Tell me, has there been any issue with gas in our building? Any leaks?" "God be with you." She waved me off. "There's been nothing like that. What's going on? And my grandma, she didn't complain to you?" I persisted. Thought it smelled like gas, or she was imagining things. "I don't understand, Daniel." She shook her head. I didn't hear anything from her. Without saying goodbye, I turned and went back to my place. The gas theory seemed the most plausible. I'd heard plenty of stories about how people, after inhaling too much, would see dead relatives, devils, and all sorts of other things. A check of the gas pipe revealed nothing either. Still, I decided to sleep as far from the kitchen as possible. I made the bed in the bedroom on Grandma's cot and kept all the windows wide open the whole day. Later, though, I had to close them. Toward the end of the day, I woke up with a terrible neck pain from the draft. I left only one window ajar in the bedroom for ventilation. To deal with the pain, I took a warm shower and then started packing my things into a bag. The plan was to wait until morning, collect the urn with the ashes, and immediately drive to another region. My packing was interrupted by a text message. I glanced at the screen, and a chill ran down my spine. The sender's name was Grandma. My trembling finger missed the correct button on the first try. From the corner of my ear, I heard a rustling noise in the kitchen. I jerked, my chest tightened, frozen with horror. I couldn't believe this was really happening. From the depths of the apartment came the distinct sound of glass clinking. Someone had tapped on a window. Nothing had shattered yet, but judging by the force of the knock, the uninvited guest wasn't trying to be subtle and was acting with confidence. "Is it real?" I whispered through ragged breaths, staggering toward the wall. I grabbed an empty crystal vase from the dresser, just to arm myself with something. I quickly glanced at the open message. The text read, You have a voice message from this subscriber. The date was the day of Grandma's death. The time, 2 a.m. sharp. Due to network issues, the last words of the unfortunate old woman, recorded after the beep of the soulless answering machine, had reached me only 2 days later. The message could be accessed via a short number. I was just about to dial when the clinking sound came again. Ignoring it was no longer an option. Stumbling on unsteady legs, I stepped into the hallway, raised the vase to head height, ready to throw it at any silhouette that appeared, and turned into the kitchen. A sharp pain pierced my stomach. I anticipated an encounter with a vile creature, preparing myself for an unequal battle. I was chilled to the bone, as if standing in an icy wind. But the kitchen was empty. I nearly burst into tears. Could it have been my imagination? Maybe I just confused the sound of breaking glass with something else? The vase slipped from my weakened hand and fell to the floor, miraculously remaining intact. Exhaling, I opened the message and pressed the numbers on the answering machine. The robot recited Grandma's number. After a jarring beep, I heard her familiar voice. Through the crackling and static, she was trying to shout to me, "Daniel, dear, I can't reach you. I saw it in the window." And then silence. I wiped the tears from my eyes, looked out the window, and recalled that terrifying vision from the previous night. I shuddered, and fighting off the rising panic, I began to slowly approach the windowsill. What had Grandma seen? The thought consumed me, sticky, revolting, and preventing any clear reasoning. I took 2 more steps, stopped, and looked out the window. I was probably clearly visible from the street. I stared intently at the bright yellow spot outside the window. Surely there couldn't really be something there. My train of thought was abruptly interrupted. A loud and distinct knock on the glass startled me. Covered in goosebumps, I lowered my gaze to the pot of aloe, to the spot where I had first discovered the strange stain, and I saw a familiar face. It was grinning, boring into me with its grotesque eyes. It raised a semblance of a human hand, jerking it sharply back against the glass with a shudder. This hideous appendage stretched from somewhere below, probably from an equally repulsive body. The creature kept pounding on the glass, leaving new and new smudges, but it couldn't break through the modern double-pane window. I was safe, even though I stood less than a meter from the nightmarish abomination. It couldn't get inside to decapitate me. It had scared my beloved Grandma to death, literally causing her heart to stop. But it couldn't defeat me. The only way to end this was through the window. But I had locked every single one as soon as I woke up. Or had I? I jerked back, recalling. The creature started shaking too. Its smile widened. It must have seen something in my eyes or read my thoughts. The grinning face moved away and suddenly darted to the right, toward the bedroom window. I screamed. My God, how I screamed. In all my 30 years of life, I had never experienced such terror. It consumed me, not wrapping around me, but dragging me into an abyss. Something crashed in the depths of the apartment. Quick, disgusting appendages slapped against the floor. Then the noise shifted to the hallway. Out of my mind, I slammed the kitchen door shut, climbed onto the windowsill, flung open the window, and leaped out. I landed in a bush under the window, tearing my back and arms to shreds and severely injuring my ear on a protruding branch. But miraculously, both of my legs remained intact. I tried to get up, tripped, and fell flat onto the grass, hitting my chin and nearly biting off my tongue. But I quickly got to my feet and ran as fast as I could. No pain, no fatigue, no thoughts. Only fear and a chilling, tingling sensation. Grandma's apartment must have slowed the monster down. I don't know how much time I gained by slamming the kitchen door shut. More and more often, I dreamed that I didn't shut it and jumped out the window, forgetting about the creature. It catches me in the bushes, sinking its teeth into my neck until it pierces my throat. I choke on my own blood and see my headless body, and then darkness falls. Nightmares haunt me every day. The wedding and work have been pushed to the back burner. I didn't even attend Grandma's funeral. I left it all to my fiancée. My money goes to a psychiatrist and pills. I've become a fearful paranoiac. I'm terrified to stay home alone. My encounter with the unknown broke me, poisoning my soul. In moments of calm, I muster the strength to make these notes. At least one line a day to recount the horrifying memories. I've already told the police and doctors everything. They listened and, surprisingly, took me seriously. But judging by the news, the killings continue. They write about them sparingly, only in local newspapers and on news channels, which means the creature is still alive and isn't planning to go anywhere.